Hey guys, I'm here with the bike I call I Love Lucy. And by the way, I do love Lucy, great mountain bike. But the other day I was out riding the bike and I noticed some vagueness in the rear end.
You know, Canooga, I really hate rear end vagueness.
Huh? You know, I tried everything. I stopped riding the bike, I checked the rear skewer, I adjusted some other things, and I just couldn't make it go away. So when I got the bike home, I took off the rear wheel and started disassembling the cassette and the rear hub. And lo and behold, I had broken the rear axle on the bike. Now, just to be clear, I'm not talking about the skewer which runs through and holds the rear hub on the bike. It's the axle that runs through the hub before you put the skewer inside the axle. That axle had actually broken, and as I would go around or move around, wobble the rear end of the bike a little bit, it was flexing, and that was causing a problem. What I want to do today, I want to explain to you how that problem occurred, how you can anticipate whether you're going to have the problem on your bike or not, and what you need to do to prevent it from happening to you. So let's get into it. Here is a rear hub similar to the hub that's on Lucy, and I'm just going to take it apart here and show you from this hub what broke. So this silver thing is the axle that runs through the hub, and you know, on that axle there are the bearings. There's the part of the ratchet system. Here's where the disc brake where the disc rotor attaches here. And what broke here is this axle broke right down in here. So there is the hub. Here is an axle. Okay, so this axle, this is the way it would be in that hub. It would be just like that. And as you can see, a bearing will rest around there. The free hub body will be over this. And that is the axle. And this is the axle that came out of Lucy. As you can see, it broke right where the bearing, right in the place where the where the bearing would be. It broke right off of there. Now, how do I know that or what caused the axle to break? And I believe it broke because that axle was flexing. And as it flexed back and forth, it ultimately broke where it was flexing. Now, the reason I believe that, this is the free hub body off of that brand new hub. And as you can see, the sides of that free hub body are very smooth and clean. On the free hub body that came out of Lucy, and if you look on the sides of this free hub, there are indentations where it's been bumping into something. If you look inside the hub, you can see the ratchet mechanism right there. And what I believe was happening was, as that axle was flexing, the outside of the free hub was bumping into these little ratchet places inside here, and as it continued to flex, it broke. Once again, this is the axle, and the reason that I believe the axle broke is that the axle is actually made out of aluminum. And I know it's made out of aluminum because if I take a magnet and I put it up against this axle, there's no magnetism. So it is not steel. It's made out of some type of alloy aluminum. Now, here is as I said, the original, or an axle like the original axle, that it's aluminum. And what I've done is I've gone in and bought a metal axle. And when you stick the magnet on that, it attaches. And clearly, that axle is made out of steel. Now, when you feel them, this steel axle is heavier than the aluminum axle, but I believe it's much less likely to flex and hence much less likely to break. Now, I believe that if you have an aluminum axle on your rear hub, you have the possibility that it will flex and either damage the freehub body or break, and that you could have a problem. Now, here is a formula hub. As you can see, this F on it, most likely it's a formula hub. Formula hubs are very common. You get them, that's original equipment on a lot of bikes. And here is the axle on this. And when I take the magnet, it's clear that that hub is not attracted. There's no magnetic field. So that axle there is an aluminum axle. Now here is a DT Swiss 240 rear hub. I've already removed, so I'm just taking it off. I'm taking the end off, and that exposes the axle shaft there. And once again, when I put the magnet on it, there's no magnetism. So this too is an aluminum axle. Now, based on my experience with DT Swiss, these things are designed pretty well, and the likelihood of that thing actually breaking, I guess, is pretty low. But based on my experience, it is aluminum, and I would be concerned. So in my experience, the aluminum axle wasn't strong enough and it broke, and I've now gone through and on almost all my bikes that have the Cruiser rear hubs, I've replaced the aluminum axle with a steel axle. The steel axles I've been able to buy off of AliExpress for about 10 bucks. It's not too big a deal to change out the axle, but you just have to go through and change it out. I believe that since I've changed them out, I will no longer have a problem. I'm not saying that this problem will happen to you. I was kind of surprised that it happened to me. I think it's pretty unlikely that the axle will actually break with an aluminum axle, but I think a much more likely problem is that the axle, by flexing, will cause damage to the ratchet system of the hub, and that will more likely fail than actually having the axle break. So my advice to you would be to go in and look at your rear axle, determine if you have a steel or an aluminum rear axle. If you're running an e-bike and you're putting a lot of pressure on the rear end, I would monitor it to make sure that there's not a failure there. I think if you keep an eye on it and or replace it with a steel axle, you can avoid a lot of problems in the future. So there you have it, guys. That's what happened to me when I broke the rear axle on my bike. I hope I've given you something to think about, and I'll see you guys at the top.